All right, welcome back for another deep dive. Today, we're tackling something I bet we've all thought about at some point. Why is it that some people can take a nasty spill and just kind of bounce back, while others, well, they end up with a cast? Or even worse, I mean, have you ever seen someone totally eat it and then they just pop right back up like it was nothing?
Yeah, it's almost like some people are just born with this, like, inner spring action, isn't it?
Right. So we're going to dig into the science behind all of this and maybe even learn some tips for staying safer when those inevitable stumbles do happen. You sent over some really fascinating sources for this one. We've got medical excerpts, some in English, some in Arabic, even some advice from a skateboarder. Seems like they know a thing or two about falling,
Oh,
right?
yeah, definitely.
And wait for it, there's even an analogy involving a 4x4 truck and a pool noodle. I'm not sure where that's going, but I'm intrigued.
I think that range of sources is what makes these deep dives so interesting, you know?
Right.
We get that blend of hard science and then what people are actually experiencing out in the world.
Absolutely. Okay, so to kick things off, one of the science IA sources talks about kinetic energy. Now, I gotta be honest, physics was never my strong suit, but
Yeah.
I get the basic idea it's energy of motion, right?
Right.
But how does that translate to whether I break a bone if I trip or just end up with a bruise?
Well, it's all about what happens to that energy when you suddenly stop moving.
Yeah.
Like imagine, one of the sources uses this comparison. So imagine you're punching a 4x4 truck as hard as you can.
Okay, ouch.
Right. Now imagine you're punching a pool noodle with that same force. Which one do you think is going to absorb that energy better?
My hand is probably gonna be pretty messed up after that truck. I'm guessing the pool noodle is gonna give a little bit more.
Exactly. So rigid things like, well, wood or unfortunately a tensed-up body, when you hit the ground, they concentrate that force. But flexible materials like a pool noodle, they dissipate it. It's why this is so important. It's why if you feel yourself falling, if you can relax as much as possible, you're basically turning your body from a 4x4 into something a bit more noodle-like.
Okay, that makes sense. Easier said than done, though, right? Like,
Yeah.
when you're about to hit the ground, how are you supposed to remember, oh, just relax, turn into a noodle?
Well, and that's where practice comes in. Our skateboarder source, he's full of tips for actually training your body to react instinctively in a fall.
Hmm.
It's like, think of a martial artist, you know, how they break a fall. It's all about redirecting that energy instead of just taking the full brunt of it head on.
Okay, so it's not just about luck, there's actual skill involved.
Absolutely. Learning to bend your knees, maybe absorb some of the impact with your legs, maybe even roll with the fall to spread out that force. Like the skateboarder actually uses the analogy of being like water. You want to stay fluid instead of rigid.
Okay, I'm starting to see how all these pieces fit together, but what about the actual strength of our bones? Surely that's got to be a major factor in whether a fall ends in a fracture or not.
You're absolutely right. We can't ignore bone density. Denser bones can withstand greater force, but what's interesting is it's not as simple as just strong bones versus weak bones. It's affected by, well, a whole bunch of things.
Like what? Like genetics? Like
Yeah.
if my parents had brittle bones, am I just doomed?
Well, genetics definitely play a role, but it's not the whole story. Age, your diet, how much exercise you get, all of those contribute to bone density. And for example, older adults tend to have lower bone density, especially women. And the medical excerpts you shared highlighted that white women in particular are susceptible to fractures in the pelvic area, and that's due to a condition called osteoporosis, which weakens the bones.
Okay, so it's a complex equation. It's not just like you inherit good bones or bad bones, full stop. But wait, now this is making me think about the skateboarder again because he was really into exercise. Is there a connection there between like hitting the gym and the strength of your bones?
Definitely. Regular physical activity, especially weight-bearing exercises, those help to build and maintain bone density. Plus, when you have stronger muscles, they act like shock absorbers. You know, they help to cushion the impact of a fall.
So it's like having built-in padding.
Yeah, exactly. And we can't forget reaction time, right? Some people have quicker reflexes. They might be able to avoid a fall entirely, or at least they can brace themselves better to kind of soften the blow.
So we've got physics, we've got bone density, muscle strength, reflexes. It's like a whole body approach to falling gracefully. But I'm curious how much the environment you're falling in matters. I mean, we all know falling on concrete is way worse than taking a tumble on, like, soft grass.
Totally. And that goes back to that energy dissipation idea. Hard surfaces, they don't absorb much of the impact at all, so most of that force is transferred directly to you. Softer surfaces like grass or even those padded gym floors, they help to cushion the blow.
Which, this reminds me, the skateboarder was also really big on wearing protective gear. He even said, like, your clothes can make a difference.
For sure. Padding, helmets, even just wearing long sleeves and pants that can provide an extra layer of protection and reduce the severity of injuries. It's about, again, creating those layers of give that soften the impact.
Speaking of impact, something I'm curious about is one of the medical sources actually defined what a fall is. I mean, are we just talking about big dramatic falls downstairs, or are we also talking about just everyday little stumbles?
It's a good question because the definition from Close et al. 1999, it actually covers a pretty wide range. It basically says inadvertently coming to rest on the ground without like passing out first or being pushed. So even tripping over that rug in your living room, technically, that counts as a fall.
Okay, well, that's both reassuring and alarming because it means that even little stumbles can be risky, right? It all depends on how we land. Okay, but let's say the worst does happen. I fall. What are some things I can actually do in that moment to try and minimize the damage?
Well, the first thing is to try and protect your head and your face. You want to tuck your chin, use your arms to cushion the impact if you can. And this might sound strange, but there was even a warning about biting your tongue. I have to admit, I never considered that.
Wait, biting your tongue during a fall? How does that even...
It might sound weird, but if your jaw clenches up on impact, it can totally happen. The source recommended keeping your tongue firmly behind your lower teeth. It's those little details that can make a big difference, you know?
Tuck chin, protect head, watch the tongue. Okay, got it. What else?
One of the hardest things to do in a fall, but also one of the most important, is to stay calm. Now, it's natural to tense up, but remember that pool noodle analogy. Tensing up is like turning yourself into that 4x4.
Right, gotta stay flexible. But how do you actually do that when your brain is screaming danger?
It takes practice, but consciously focusing on relaxing your limbs as much as possible can really help. And if you can, try to aim for the fleshier parts of your body, like your forearms or even your buttocks to absorb the impact.
Okay, that makes sense. Spread out the force. All right, so I've fallen, I've hopefully relaxed, and now what? What are the first things I should do after I hit the ground?
First, just take a moment to assess, right? Can you get up safely? If so, try to do it slowly and carefully, maybe use a nearby piece of furniture for support. The sources described a technique of like rolling onto your side, then pushing up to your hands and knees, and then slowly rising from there.
Okay, that's good to know. But what if I can't get up? What happens then?
Then it's essential to call for help. If you're alone, try to reach a phone or make some noise to attract attention. The sources mention things like banging on a wall or even using your walker to create a sound.
And of course, if it's a serious fall or if there's obvious injury, call emergency services immediately.
Absolutely. Don't hesitate to seek medical attention if you're in any doubt. And remember, there are resources available even if you're not seriously injured. The NHS 111 service in the UK, for example, can give advice and connect you with local support. There are even specialized teams trained to help people get up safely using equipment like the Mangar ELK, which is like a portable lift for those who can't get up on their own.
It's reassuring to know that those resources are out there. But all this talk about falling is honestly making me a bit anxious. And I'm thinking that that anxiety itself might actually make people less active, which ironically increases their risk of falling. It's a vicious cycle.
You've hit on a crucial point there because the psychological impact of falls, especially for older adults, it can be really significant. Fear of falling can actually become a self-fulfilling prophecy.
So how do we break that cycle? How do we deal with the mental and emotional side of all of this? I mean, this feels like a deep dive all on its own.
It is, and thankfully, the sources actually offer some insight there. Acknowledging the fear is the first step. It's valid, right?
Yeah.
And then it's about building confidence gradually.
Right.
Starting with small steps like improving your balance, your strength through gentle exercises can make a big difference. Some experts even suggest practicing safe falling techniques in a controlled environment.
Like a falling gym, where you can practice rolls and landings without getting hurt.
Exactly. Might sound unconventional, but building those physical skills can have a huge impact on mental confidence. Like our skateboarder source said, it's all about leveling up, one step at a time.
I love that philosophy. It's not about becoming fearless. It's about expanding your comfort zone and knowing that you can handle those stumbles. This has been so eye-opening. It's not just about luck. It's about understanding how physics, our bodies, and even our minds all play a part.
And remember, even though falls are a part of life, they don't have to be debilitating. By taking these proactive steps to improve our balance, our strength, our confidence, we can navigate the world with a lot more resilience.
It's interesting, isn't it, how much the sources connect our physical health and our mental well-being.
It's not just about like preventing the falls themselves, but it's about building this lifestyle that supports resilience, on all levels.
Yeah, and this isn't just for older folks either, right? I keep thinking back to the skateboarder we talked about. Yeah. He's all about pushing his limits, but he does it with this clear understanding of how to fall safely. It's like he's saying, yeah, level up your skills, but also level up your ability to handle those wipeouts.
Exactly. It's about having that sense of, well, agency, right? You can't control every circumstance, but you can equip yourself to handle those unexpected events, whether it's, well, a literal fall or maybe it's a metaphorical setback in life.
So it's about being prepared, not paranoid. I'm not going to walk around in bubble wrap all the time, but I am going to pay more attention to those loose rugs in my house I keep tripping over. And maybe I'll start doing some balance exercises.
Yeah, those small changes can make a big difference. And remember, this deep dive is just the beginning. It's about sparking your curiosity, giving you the tools to explore further. What stood out to you so far?
I gotta say, that whole tongue biting thing really stuck with me. I mean, I never would have thought of that. And it makes you realize how much we take for granted about our bodies and how they react in these unexpected situations.
Yeah, it's those little details that are often overlooked, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they can have pretty significant consequences. And I think it highlights the value of having these diverse sources. We wouldn't have come across that little nugget of wisdom if we hadn't included those medical excerpts, which, I mean, they might not seem as immediately relevant as, say, a skateboarder's advice, but they each add this unique piece to the puzzle, don't they?
You're right. It's like having all these different perspectives that all contribute to a more complete picture. Okay, so we talked about the physics of falling, the importance of bone density and muscles, reflexes, even protecting your tongue. But what happens after the fall? The sources mentioned something called a long lie. What exactly does that mean?
Yeah, it's kind of, well, an unsettling term, but it refers to the time that someone spends on the floor after a fall, unable to get up. And the consequences can be more serious than just that initial injury.
Right, that's where that statistic about the 50% mortality rate after long lies comes in. And that's a pretty scary thought.
It is. It's a stark reminder that falls, that they're always just about bumps and bruises. Being immobile on the floor for too long, that can lead to other complications, like hypothermia, dehydration, pressure sores, even muscle damage. Our bodies just aren't meant to be stationary for a really long time, especially in those vulnerable positions.
Wow, so it's not just the impact of the fall, but it's what happens in those minutes and hours afterwards that can be really critical. We need to be prepared to act quickly, both for ourselves and if we see someone else fall.
Exactly. Knowing what to do in those situations can, well, it can literally be life-saving. And it starts with understanding the risks and recognizing that even falls that might seem minor, they can have serious consequences, especially for, well, older adults or people with other health conditions.
So what can we do to try and minimize those risks? I know we touched on some things, but it feels like there's a whole action plan here, right?
There is. A lot of it comes down to, well, simple home safety measures. Removing trip hazards, making sure you have good lighting, wearing sensible shoes, installing grab bars in key areas like the bathroom. All those things can make a big difference.
It's like a home safety checklist specifically for falls. Makes you realize how many things we can do to make our environment safer. But what about the things we do? Like, are there everyday habits that we have that might make falls more likely?
Yes. One of the sources called these behavioral factors. Things like carrying heavy objects, reaching for things on high shelves without using a step stool, even just rushing around. These can all increase the risk of falling. It's about being more mindful of our actions and taking a moment to assess, like, potential hazards before we just jump into things.
I'm definitely guilty of rushing around. It's like that old saying, slow and steady wins the race. But in this case, it's more like slow and steady prevents the fall.
Exactly. And speaking of being proactive, the sources also really emphasized regular exercise. It's not just for building bone density and muscle strength, but also for improving balance and coordination.
Okay, so something like Tai Chi or yoga, which focus on those slow, controlled movements, those could be really helpful, right?
Absolutely. Those types of activities can be especially beneficial for improving stability and reducing those, well, those clumsy missteps that often lead to falls.
This is making me think about exercise differently. It's not just about fitting into your jeans, it's about training your body to move with intention and awareness. And that translates to better stability and hopefully fewer falls.
And all of these lifestyle changes, they're not just about preventing falls, it's about promoting overall health and well-being, right?
Yeah.
It's a win-win.
I love that perspective. It's about taking ownership of our health and knowing that we have the power to make a difference. So it's not about living in fear, it's about making those informed choices that build a life that supports our resilience. And that's empowering, not just for ourselves, but for anyone we might care for who might be more vulnerable to falls.
You summed it up perfectly. It's about being proactive and taking those small, consistent actions that can have the biggest impact on our lives and the lives of those around us.
This is all really sinking in. But there's one thing I'm still grappling with. We've talked a lot about the physical and the practical aspects of falling, but what about the emotional side? Like the fear, the anxiety that comes with it. If fear keeps people from being active, isn't that just going to increase their risk even more?
You're absolutely right. That fear can be paralyzing, and it's something the sources address directly.
Yeah.
They talk about the psychological impact of falls, especially for, well, older adults who may have already experienced a fall or know someone who's been seriously injured. That fear, it can become a major barrier to staying active and engaged in life.
It's like this awful cycle, right? You're afraid of falling, so you limit your activities, which weakens your body and then makes you more likely to fall.
Yeah, it's a very real concern, and it's important to acknowledge those feelings. The sources emphasized open communication, talking to loved ones, friends, your healthcare providers about those anxieties. Sometimes just expressing those fears can help alleviate the burden.
It's like by giving voice to the fear, you take away some of its power. It's no longer this like silent looming threat, but it's something that you can actually address and work through.
And remember, there's no shame in seeking help, whether it's physical therapy to improve your balance and strength, occupational therapy to assess home safety and maybe make modifications, or even counseling to address the emotional impact of a previous fall. There are resources available to support you.
It's about building a support system, knowing that you don't have to face this alone. And I remember the skateboarder talked about practicing falling techniques in like a controlled environment. It's like kind of facing your fears head on, but in a safe, supportive setting.
Yeah, it's a brilliant approach. By gradually exposing yourself to those situations and learning how to react effectively, you're building both the physical skills and the mental resilience. It's about proving to yourself that you can handle those challenges.
It's like that saying, fall down 7 times, stand up 8. It's not about avoiding falls altogether. It's about learning how to fall gracefully and get back up, well, stronger.
That's a powerful image. And it speaks to the inherent resilience of the human spirit. We are capable of overcoming adversity, of adapting and evolving. And sometimes those falls, those setbacks, they can be the catalyst for incredible growth and transformation.
This whole deep dive has been quite the journey. We started off feeling, I think, a little bit anxious about falling, but now I feel this sense of, I don't know, empowerment, possibility. It's not just about avoiding falls. It's about understanding our bodies, respecting their limits, but also recognizing their incredible capacity for resilience, renewal.
It's about shifting our perspective. Instead of asking, what if I fall? We can ask, how can I prepare for those inevitable stumbles? And how can I bounce back stronger?
And I think that shift in mindset is key. It's not about becoming fearless. It's about becoming informed, proactive, adaptable. It's about embracing life's challenges, knowing that we have the tools, the inner strength to navigate them.
And perhaps, just perhaps, understanding the intricacies of healing, the way our bodies mend and rebuild, could that inspire a sense of awe and gratitude for this incredible resilience we all possess?
Yeah, it's a really interesting way to look at it, isn't it? Instead of fearing the fall, we could maybe focus on that like amazing comeback story that our bodies are capable of.
It is fascinating because that healing process itself kind of mirrors so much of what we've already talked about. Bone density, muscle strength, even our mindset, they all play a role in how well and how quickly we recover from a fracture or an injury.
It's making me think back to those medical sources. I remember reading some details about how like bones actually knit back together. They mentioned something called a callus forming. Is that like a bone scab?
Yeah, that's a great analogy. A callus is this incredible structure that basically bridges the broken ends of a bone. It starts out soft, but then it gradually hardens into, solid bone. It's like the body's own internal scaffolding.
So even in breakage, there's this like inherent drive towards repair and strength building. That's kind of inspiring, isn't it?
Absolutely. And it connects back to that idea of resilience we keep talking about. Our bodies are designed to bounce back, to adapt and overcome. And the more we understand about those processes, the more we can support them.
Okay, but what about when things don't heal perfectly? The sources mentioned complications like delayed healing, even the idea that some fractures never fully recover.
Yeah, that's where things get more complex. Just like with all those factors that influence our risk of falling in the first place, there are so many variables that affect healing. Age, overall health, how severe the fracture was, even access to proper medical care.
Right. And I imagine our mental state plays a role too. Like if you're stressed and anxious about the injury, that can't be good for recovery, right?
Exactly. There's actually a growing body of research on the mind-body connection and how our mental state can actually impact physical healing. A positive outlook, stress management techniques, even things like mindfulness practices, they can all potentially contribute to a smoother recovery.
So it's almost like there's this parallel process happening, the physical mending of the bone and then the mental and emotional processing of the whole experience. It's all interconnected.
Precisely. And that's why it's so important to approach healing holistically, addressing both the physical and the psychological aspects of the injury.
This deep dive has been quite a journey. I mean, we started off feeling a bit anxious, I think, about falling, but now I feel this sense of, I don't know, empowerment, possibility. It's not just about avoiding falls, it's about understanding our bodies, respecting their limits, but also recognizing their incredible capacity for, well, for resilience, for renewal.
It's about shifting our perspective, right? Instead of asking, what if I fall? We can ask, how can I prepare for those inevitable stumbles? And how can I bounce back stronger?
And I think that shift in mindset is really key. It's not about becoming fearless. It's about becoming informed, proactive, and adaptable. It's about embracing, I think, life's challenges, knowing that we have the tools and the inner strength to navigate them.
And perhaps understanding the intricacies of healing, the way our bodies mend and rebuild, that can maybe inspire a sense of awe and gratitude for this incredible resilience that we all possess.
So, to everyone listening, the next time you trip over a rug or misjudge a step, remember this. It's not the fall that defines you, it's how you rise. And who knows, maybe that stumble will actually lead to a new understanding of your own incredible strength. Keep exploring, keep learning, and keep bouncing back.
Until next time, keep diving deep.